Welcome to iGlobal, the great big Indian money show. We are at Going Once, Going Twice, and Gone, a small podcast on the auction market in the UK. My name is Nilesh Patel. I'm a principal at Prideview Group, one of the leading representatives of private investors looking to invest in UK commercial property. So every year, more than £1 billion of property is sold to investors at commercial property auctions. Average lot sizes are around £600,000, making these type of properties an ideal prospect for private buyers with the right finance behind them. Today, I have three people on my panel who are going to help me analyze the auction market as it stands and give you the pros and cons of why buying in auction could be the best bet for your next investment. I have Sanjay Rugani of Sterling Finance, Idnan Liaquat of Axiom Stone, and Tiba Raja of Market Financial. So over to the panel. Guys, thank you for joining us. What would you like to talk about first when it comes to auctions? Shall we start with what kind of properties your clients are currently buying in auction at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely, Nilesh. What we're seeing at the moment is very much residential properties, central London, particularly from the Indian diaspora coming into the UK. Just seems to be a big demand for it. Don't know what anyone else thinks on that.
I mean, I act for a number of clients who trade property, and a lot of our clients are buying sort of the mixed-use properties for trading on. So they buy the property at the auction, maybe asset manage, and then flip privately or put it into another auction and sell it. That's some of the people that we act for.
Wow. Okay. So you're seeing people buying in one auction and selling in others, because this used to be a real trend we've seen at Prideview, say a decade or so ago, when there was less visibility for properties. But now with the way auctions are and the marketing that they're doing, going online, etc., sometimes it's quite hard to actually trade a property in one auction and stick it in the other. We do see people buying properties maybe in auction and selling privately, or buying privately and selling in auction. But Idnan, that's a really interesting point there.
Yeah, I agree, Nilesh. More so, I mean, since sort of COVID and since the pandemic, I'm finding more people are buying from auction and selling it privately, because some private investors don't have the ability to buy from auction. But then what happens is the regular sort of investor, or people like yourself, Prideview Group, have the ability to buy from auction, and then they sell it to private investors.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree. That is definitely a sort of trend, and I think we should definitely cover that shortly. Tiba, how about yourself? What kind of things have you seen clients buying in auctions?
I think from our point of view at MFS, we found a lot of people buying commercial, and I think there's a big trend at the moment to convert commercial properties to mixed use, as Idnan said, and to residentials, convert them back to residentials as well. So we're getting a lot of commercial properties, particularly the ones with tenants already, existing tenants.
Yes.
So, that's a good investment. So there's already a tenant in there. So people are looking at those sort of things as well, because we're providing bridging loans for people on those bases, because they've got a guaranteed income. And it's quite a good way to use an auction to get to the commercial side. So we particularly found commercial quite popular.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. So at Prideview Group, we specialize in commercial property investment. And one thing that surprised us is, and it's been around for a while now, that, the wall of money that is waiting to be invested into UK commercial property, subject to deals coming through at the right price. And traditionally, why do buyers go to auction? They go there looking for bargains. So anybody that has money to spend, usually your auction is your first port of call of where you're going to spend it. And there are always people looking at properties, looking at lots. And, at Prideview, what we've seen is sort of two types of investor. We've got the really safe, hassle-free investor who just wants a long lease investment, stable return, no nonsense. That kind of investor will buy things like convenience stores, medical properties, pizza takeaways during COVID have been really popular. We sold one in Southampton, let to Domino's on an 11-year lease for £500,000 earlier this year, and that was yielding 5%. We also sold a Specsavers optician on a 10-year lease in a town called March in Cambridgeshire, which again sold for around £500,000 and yielded 5%. So those are the hassle-free deals. But as Tiba mentioned, there are a lot of people there looking for what I see as called value-add opportunities, commercial properties, shops and flats, things like this, where you can change the usage, convert upper parts to residential, chop up, sell off. So it's actually amazing how much demand there is, given how difficult times seem to be.
That especially seems to be the case for the people with portfolios at the moment. I think they're sort of regearing and then what have you. That's what we've seen, getting ready to sort of pounce on that offer or a deal, so to speak, that you mentioned earlier on, Nilesh. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of interest. So what we get at PrideView, whenever we sort of jointly list a property in auction, or when we look at an auction, we get a lot of people sort of sniffing around looking, because people do want to invest, but it's just that barrier. It's really difficult. And, I think this is something we need to talk about today is, online auctions as well as traditional auctions. So, Idnan mentioned it earlier, the average investor finds it very difficult to enter the auction arena. There are so many pitfalls. There are, like I mentioned at the start, hundreds and hundreds of properties going under the hammer each month. There is so much information out there. And, the truth is the particulars don't reveal everything. And I think this is an area I'd like to bring Idnan in on. And it's something we often tell our clients to do. Don't just go in the room and put your hand up, or now don't just go and register online and start bidding. You need to do a lot more work on the property than just reading whatever the current pack is online. You need to really be lined up with a lawyer and probably a broker beforehand, so what the legal situation of the property is and the finance options are. So, Idnan, what would you suggest an investor do that's looking at an auction property? Or what should they be saying to their lawyer before they think about bidding?
I mean, what I say, Nilesh, is where you pay attention to the detail, the bigger picture takes care of itself. What many sort of first-time buyers from auction, what they do, they look at the auction particulars and think, that's all the information and we can go ahead and proceed with the purchase of this property. That's not the case. The legal pack contains essential information that they need to have reviewed by a specialist legal expert. In the legal pack, I'd expect to be able to review for them the title information, which will tell us who owns the property, whether it's freehold, leasehold, whether there's any restrictive covenants related to property. In most cases, there's also searches contained in the pack. Searches include local authority search, environmental search, drainage search. We'll also sometimes see some standard replies to inquiries. In commercial property cases, these are called CPSCs, and in residential, these are called protocol forms. But one of the essential things that we look at for in a legal pack are the special conditions. The special conditions are very important. These contain information regarding when completion needs to occur. With auction properties, you have completion that sometimes occurs in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. You may need to contribute towards the buyer's legal fees, the searches. You may have to pay a premium on top of the purchase price. This information may not necessarily be on the sale particular, so it's essential you ask someone to review the special conditions for you. I had a client who was going to buy an auction property a couple of weeks ago, and the sales particular stated that the property is a freehold mixed-use building. So there was a ground floor shop with some residential uppers. So he registered for a property, had his deposit ready. It was a £500,000 guide price. When he asked me to look at the legal pack for him, what I realized in the special condition is that the seller was actually selling off the ground floor but retaining the uppers on a long lease. That changed the deal in its entirety. So that review that the buyer asked us to carry out on his behalf changed whether he was going to buy this property or not. So it's massive. It has massive implications. So it's essential that you ask a specialist legal advisor to review your legal pack prior to proceeding to a purchase or auction property.
I think that's spot on, and that's the experience we've had. I mean, I've seen someone not too long ago bought a Coral Investment, that's the betting shop, thought he was getting a 10-year lease, didn't realize there was a break clause hidden into the legals, and had already exchanged on the property when he realized actually there was only 3 years odd until the expiry and they were going to leave, which transformed the value of the asset. So look, this is the money show. So Idnan, give us a rough idea of how much would it cost someone to get a legal report done on, a standard property with one or two leases or one title or whatever it is?
See, that's the question we as lawyers hate to answer. The reason being is because every lot size is different. Nish, as you're aware, but a typical lot size, let's say, I'll use the example that I used previously. So a £500,000 purchase of a freehold building with a ground floor shop and some residential uppers, a legal pack review for something like that would be £750 plus VAT. But if you look at the sort of bigger picture and the grand scheme of things, that's a minimum spend considering the amount of money that's involved and how much can go wrong.
Yeah, look,
once
at
the
the end
hammer
of the day,
goes down, once the
Good
hammer
insurance
goes down,
policy, isn't it?
yeah,
exactly.
Once the hammer goes down, you're committed.
I think the key thing is you have to do your homework properly, just not dependent on the legal pack. You really need to dig further and make sure you're making the right choice. So yeah, definitely having a good solicitors, conveyancing, and doing a good proper homework is one of the most important things, I think, when you go to an auction.
I think this is
Sorry, talking about lawyers, and one of the other experiences that we always find that particularly new investors coming through the auction is they go to their local lawyer who did their conveyancing 20 years ago when they bought their house. They don't realise the timescales that are required, as Idnan would say, to do that due diligence and do it quick. So it is important you go to somebody like Axiom and get these sort of things looked at fairly rapidly because they're doing it on a daily basis. If you're going to go for an auction, 28 days, Nilesh, as you and I both know, is typically the time, extended to 6 weeks at the moment. That doesn't give you much time, frankly.
Absolutely. And the amount of time we receive calls the day before the auction, I'm going to buy a property tomorrow, so can you have a look at the legal pack? I'd say with your sort of finances and the legal due diligence that needs to be carried out well in advance, as soon as you know you're going for a property, have those conversations.
Yeah, I'd agree in that. And how many times have tried you given a contract after it's already exchanged to start doing the legals on? So look, we've seen it all, we've experienced it all. I think between us, we have a lot of experience. And I think the sort of general consensus, and I think it's going to carry on throughout this conversation, is anyone buying an auction, get the right team around you, get the right advice. And, I'd like to move on to the theme of finance as well, because we've got two, finance professionals with us today. And let's be honest, this is the Indian money show, and Indian people love using other people's money to buy property. So look, my experience of finance in auctions is difficult, but can you guys share some experiences on your end and give us what advice do you give to clients that are looking to get a loan when buying an auction property? So Tiba, maybe you'd like to start?
Yes, certainly. So from our perspective, we provide bridging loans. So if somebody is going to an auction, obviously, first they need to do their homework, which is really important, have all their legals and ready. And what they need to do is have the money ready, because as you know, when you go to an auction, once you've bid, you've got a very short window to provide the rest of the money. If you don't, then you lose your deposit, which is a lot of money for a lot of people. So with a bridging loan, the way we operate is somebody would come to us and say, I'm interested in this property. It's approximately valued at this amount. And then we would then provide them an agreement in principle, similar to a decision in principle if it were a mortgage, and basically guaranteeing them that as soon as they bid, we would then send out a surveyor and provide them with the funds. So normally the funds range from about up to 75% of the loan to value. But obviously this is subject to change when the valuers go, and it could be more, it could be less. And sometimes we also incorporate some extra funding for if you need to refurbish the place, because a lot of the properties, they need work. So we would also factor those things into it as well. And then we obviously charge on a monthly basis. So bridging loans are more expensive than mortgages, there's no doubt. But it's a short term, it's not meant forever. So the whole idea is you go in, you've got your money, and then you start the process of a long-term exit. There's always an exit. So every loan we do, we must always have an exit plan, and that's key. Yeah, so, and then we charge every month, and the minimum is 3 months that we do, but a lot of them do it from 3 months onwards. So yeah, that's basically how it operates. So we have valuers, we have legals, we have a decision in principle, basically, and once you put the hammer down, the hammer goes down, we basically get the funds out pretty quickly. So bridging loans work faster than a bank.
Definitely.
Because we've got the money in the bank account, and we can do it from as little as 3 days, 7 days, 15 days, and you have the money. And at least the investor doesn't have to panic or worry he's going to lose his deposit. And he can also play around with his finances, as he's a business money man as well, so he wants it to turn around quickly. That's basically how we work.
And I think that's super important, because look, like you said, it's about the speed of getting that money, the speed of the decision making, and auctions like that same thing are all about speed. Buying and selling in auction is a rapid process, and you need people that can move quickly. Sanjay, I presume the lending you can arrange for clients is going to be more long-term, because look, at the end of the day, most people buying auction properties, they're keeping these properties for 10, 15 years. So how does that pan out?
Well, it really does depend on the situation. I agree with everything Tiba's actually said. And in terms of bridging, we actually provide up to about 35, 40 million pounds worth of bridging annually. So we're fully sort of working on that line, because, one can buy a property, it may not be fit for purpose, as you say, Tiba, that it may need some work doing to it, long-term isn't available on that basis, etc. So what we tend to do is we work both. If we need to get something done immediately, we go to such as MFS here, or alternatively other lenders, and put a short term. I grant it is expensive, but it's a short term. We're looking at maybe 3 months to 6 months maximum, depending on the project, and you factor that in. But at the same time, make sure you are looking at long-term exits, because you're either going to buy, refurbish it, sell it, refinance your long-term property portfolio, or put it on as an armchair investor, you might think, well, okay, I'm dipping my toes into this, I'm going to do a buy-to-let mortgage. But all of this have consequences if you don't have the money in place to go into an auction with.
Fine.
So that's where we generally are, Nilesh.
Let's talk about rates, though, because at the end of the day, we need some figures. I need to hold you guys to something, and I know you don't want to give too much, but I don't mind if you want to talk about...
I'm happy to give the rates. I'm happy to give the rates. So it's like, it starts from like 0.59% per month, basically. And depending on the property, the risk value, it obviously goes up and so forth. We don't charge exit fees and things like that. So basically, it's what you see is what you get. So I think it's very transparent. Yeah. There's no hidden costs whatsoever, and you can leave after 3 months if you want to redeem early. You can do that, and it can last up to 12 months or up to 18 months. If, for example, you're doing the project and it's taking a little bit longer, that's fine. It does happen. We've all done property developments and they've taken much longer than what the builder has said. So,
of course.
It happens. So there's flexibility. With bridging, there's always flexibility. So I think you have to look at the advantage over anything else. And you always know that it's not forever. It's, you need to go to a buy-to-let, or you need to refinance it or sell another asset. So yeah, for sure.
Sanjay, how about yourself?
I'd agree with those. Yeah, so the rates are about, from, as Tiba said, they'll provide it from 0.59 up to 1.25 in some instances. We've got lenders that will do facilities at 1.5%, but no valuations. It's literally look at the property, etc., 2% facility fees, etc., and really just get onto it, because they're charging for the risk of knowing what they're actually funding here. So the market is, on a long-term basis, rates have sort of jumped up a little bit, anything from sort of 2.5, 2.8 to 4% on a portfolio in a limited company. Again, that's gone up to about 3.5 to 4%. So the rates are there or thereabouts. It really depends on individual circumstances, assets, and so forth.
Fantastic. Okay, well, look, I think that's really helpful, and I think people will find that very useful. Let's talk about some more tips for the buyers. I've got a few before we talk about who are the people that are buying these properties in auction right now. So look, people come to auction looking for a bargain. We've all seen lots of examples of people getting burnt, but equally we've all seen examples of people making money, and quite serious money as well. So shall we talk about a few tips for buyers? What are the things to look out for, or what's the best way to sort of operate in an auction?
Absolutely. I mean, Nilesh, usually with your conventional purchases, they take anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. You have the opportunity to carry out due diligence. Lawyers have the opportunity to raise inquiries. We get the answers to those inquiries. With auction, you have a much smaller window. So the auction pack is issued. That's your window to carry out all your due diligence. Make sure you view the property. Make sure you're asking questions. If you get your legal pack reviewed well in advance, that then gives us the opportunity to raise any questions with the auctioneer or the vendor solicitors. So the tips that I would give is to be prepared well in advance. Don't be one of those people that waits till the last day and that's when they wake up and realize that they need to get all these things done.
Okay, fantastic.
I also think that when you go to a property, you need to have a budget in mind, a property auction. So you can go in there with all intention and get carried away with your feelings. You know, if you see something, you really like it and think, oh God, I want this, I want this. So I think you always need to have a budget, a line, a plan. This is not where I'm going to go above, because it can get a bit silly. And I think I've noticed also, because it's online now, there's more consumers, there's more people looking, it's easier, the audience is vast and people are outbidding each other. So I think you have to be very sensible when you go to these auctions. You need to have a budget, a line where you will not go over, bearing in mind, you know, you have done your homework, comparison sites and everything. I think that's very important for people when they go to an auction.
Yeah, I mean, on that budget note, my advice to people would be, you know, when you're looking at a budget, if you want a realistic chance of buying a property in auction, don't just set your heart on the guide price. You know, people need to understand the guide price is there to sort of suck you in. You know, it's the lowest the seller will accept, but by no means is it what the seller really wants. It's the price that's there to create some sort of competitive bidding. So I see too many people coming to auction thinking they're going to buy at the guide. And don't get me wrong, it is happening at the moment, especially with more auctions online. But set yourself a realistic budget, a little bit over the guide, so you've got a fighting chance of coming home with that property and also being happy about it.
So I think the way to really describe that is be commercial about it, not emotional about it, right, Nilesh?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I think, yeah.
Yeah, be commercial about it. And you know, I agree with it, and make sure you've got your pack ready. And more importantly, the finance. The finance is so important. And Tifa, you must see this often. You know, people come last minute, I've agreed to buy this, I haven't got the funds, I need to complete in 48 hours type thing. That's not the way to do this, because if you get stuck with that, you have a large deposit on the line that you could end up losing. And that's a massive consideration. Yeah. Anybody going to an auction has to, whether it's online or in the room.
Exactly. It's absolutely right, Sanjay, because we experienced that a lot last year because of the pandemic. A lot of the banks stopped lending, and they were, you know, the portfolios was much more restricted what their lending requirements were. So we found a lot of people coming to us stuck in dire straits.
The big issue on that. Oh, sorry, cut across you there for a second.
Sure.
The big issue there is really that the mainstream lenders have cut back on their loan to values, as you and I both know. You will go up to 75%. Yeah, the banks are now looking at 60 to 65%. If there's a commercial downstairs, is it retail? And I'll give you an example of this. A high street lender who, believe it or not, has, we had a client that we had to take to them. The ground floor was actually one of their own banks. It was a bank branch, upstairs some resi stuff. They class that as retail. And they said, we're not even going to do it.
Yeah.
It's a bank. So you've got to really, you know, watch out for these little nuances that come your way.
I mean, Sanjay, when you're talking about finances, it's so important. You know, the number of times people have come to me and said, I've got £100,000, so my budget is £500,000. You know, it's not realistic. And thinking you're going to get borrowing or backing it too much is just not the way. Look, this is an investment. It's for the long term. You know, a lot of our Indian clients, you know, to be honest with you, the majority I deal with in auction are cash buyers. They don't even need finance. But the point is, if you're going to get finance, be prudent. Don't over borrow. We've had a banking crisis 10 years ago where people got wiped out by over borrowing as well. So it's just about definitely borrow. I always tell people try and borrow on these assets. They're good assets, but don't bank on getting so much money and you're not having any equity in the deal.
One of the key facts to remember that lenders will look at what the income on that asset is to demonstrate and to work out what amount of borrowing you can have. that's a key factor. It literally needs to stand on its own feet, which will ultimately determine how much of a loan to value you get.
Amazing. There's other little tips and tricks I could add. Bidding tactics. When we are back in the room, do you enter early? Do you come in at the last minute and try and steal the deal? What kind of increments do you use? When we bid in auctions for our clients, we will look at how the competitive bidder is bidding. We will gauge how keen are they for this property. We might hit them with a £50,000 increment. We might go just 5, 5, 5 and go slowly. So it is a different world of property buying, and it is requires very quick thinking. And to be honest with you, of course I'm going to say it because I am an agent that helps people buy an auction, but I would say use an agent to do some of these things. What we can help people do in auction is buy prior. The property might have 4 weeks completion set on it on day one, but you might make a deal with the seller where you offer them a nice amount above guide to do the deal before auction. And you might say, actually, can you give me 8 weeks completion? You'll be very surprised what sellers might say if they get their price, and that 8 weeks gets you your finance. So think about, shall I try go for this prior? But of course, to go prior, you probably need to go via an agent who can speak with the auctioneers. You can try it yourself. Or do you want to wait for the room? Or maybe do you really want to not be too emotionally attached, see what happens, and do what a lot of people do is wait till after the auction if it doesn't sell and get it cheaper after. All of these things can happen, but it just depends on you and your attachment to that property and how much you want it.
Do you find you do a lot prior to auction in your line of business?
That's a really good question. And actually, I was running some numbers actually yesterday just to prepare for this event. And so this year, everything has been online. So at Pride View Group, we've done 20 auction transactions worth £30 million in the last year during COVID. So we've really had to master how to buy and sell online. And it's not easy, and it's very different to going into the ballroom and the more impulsive way of doing business. What we saw is, of those transactions we did 10 disposals where we took clients' properties, put them in the room for sale. Now, 75% of those were sold prior. What does this tell you? This tells you that sellers are very nervous right now. They don't actually want to risk their property selling in the room because they feel that there's not enough buyers in that online auction room. There's a lot of barriers to entry to actually bid online now. You've got to give over money laundering documents. You've got to put bidding fees up front. You've got to do a lot of work, whereas in the old days, you just walk into the room and put your finger up. So selling in the room now is actually being perceived as quite a dangerous thing, and people would rather do deals prior. So I would say, think about buying prior now until the ballrooms return, which, I'm very sure they will do, midway through this year.
Nilesh, one question on that. The deals that are going in the auction, how many of those have dropped away the last moment once the auction has taken place? And for what reasons?
I mean, you're never going to know those facts. So look, auctioneers, like everyone in business, will always massage the figures to show a sort of positive story. So right now in the news, you're reading about very good sales rates, your 80%, 90%. So look, we've got to ignore all that. You've got to go below the surface here. The reason 80% of properties are selling is because, probably half of them, or maybe a quarter of properties that were on sale on day one were withdrawn on the last day because they realized there was zero interest for them. So this is the market we are in. It's a buyer's market. Auction is a great place to be, but equally sellers are not that desperate to sell. So they still need their price. You can't lowball sellers to the point where they will just sell just like that. It's not happening yet. There's no distressed deals to a large degree out there. So, get the property you want, do your work, and like we said, work with the right people, and go home happy. It's a bricks and mortar investment.
Great.
Okay, can I bring you guys in on who the buyers are now? Let's keep it real. We're dealing with a lot of Indian investors amongst us. Who are these Indians? Because we see Indians all over the world.
Okay, no, from my perspective, we have obviously UK Indians looking to borrow for auctions, but equally we also now have a lot of interest from Dubai, Singapore and India as well, all over the world now, who are interested in investing and buying in London, primarily in London. So all our customer base is the whole of the world now. So yeah, so it's not just London or UK, it's everywhere.
Fantastic. Idnan?
Yeah, so I mean, very much like Tiba, a lot of our sort of original base was sort of UK Indian work, but now we have set up an India desk, and that is attracting some of the Indian based clients for us, and we're sort of bringing them that way because of the links that they've got with some of the finance companies, the banks. That's attracting customers or clients, sorry, for Axiom Stone from India.
Sanjay, how about yourself?
Yes, same really, in the sense that a lot of our work is local. A lot of local Indians are investing, they're re-gearing their assets, they're sort of looking at opportunities, they think they're going to get a steal. But equally, the other flip side, as Idnan and Tiba have both mentioned, we are seeing a lot of investors from overseas, particularly India at the moment. It seems what with Brexit now being sort of almost completed in the way it has, and COVID in a way it seems to have given them the opportunity to think, well, okay, London I like for various reasons. It's a safe investment place, so let's go and buy there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better way to get involved in the country by buying some freehold property. So, I agree with that. I think the sort of interest from the Indian diaspora in the UK is, to be honest, it's always going to be huge. So, it's our job to try and serve it. I think from my point of view, we deal with a lot of Indians here locally. It's obviously very obvious what the Indian population here has achieved in this country and the kind of businesses they've run. And our job is to help them find nice investments that sit alongside their businesses, to pass down to their children, rental income, which gets you through things like COVID, which, to be honest with you, has been a very tough year with a lot of businesses, shutting down or just going silent. And, property income has been key to sustaining a lot of our investors throughout this crisis. So, hats off to a lot of the hardworking Indian people out there, based in the UK who have saved up that money and now, are investing it wisely via, people like us. So, yeah, that's what I generally see and have been seeing for many years. Should we bring it to a close? Is there any sort of closing remarks about auctions and any other final tips you would like to share?
I mean, I would just sort of finish off by saying there's no price that you could put on being well prepared. So just be very well prepared, do all your homework, and then you'll be in a good sort of place in terms of auction purchases.
Fantastic.
I would actually say be commercially, not emotional, and make sure you've got your funding and whatever in place before you go and make that bid. Otherwise, you will be stuck.
Tiba?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly as what Sanjay said. And obviously always be prepared, well prepared with all the documents, your legals, your finance, open eyes, and when you go into that auction room, just be fully prepared. So yeah, and you've got to know what you want as well. You can't just go in there randomly thinking, oh, I think I'll have this. So yeah, you need to plan properly.
So I'm going to slightly contradict you guys there. I mean, of course, I'm going to say buyer beware, but I will also say to people, don't overthink it. Be prepared, but don't overthink it to the nth degree. There is a point where you need to take a commercial view if you want to get a deal done, and be bold, move forward, and buy one and then move on to the next one. That's how you do it. That's how you build a portfolio. So I'd like to thank all of you guys for joining. Really appreciate it. We have had, just to remind everyone, Sanjay Rughani from Sterling Financial, Idnan Liaquat from Axiom Stone Solicitors, Tiba Raja from Market Financial. My name is Nilesh Patel. I'm from Prideview Group. Thanks for joining the auction podcast at the Indian Money Show. I hope to see you guys soon, and please contact us with any inquiries you have about auction or any other commercial property needs. Thank you very much.